we have with us Chantal Line Carpentier, the chief of the UNCTAD New York office. Chantal, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ideagen. As we all know, 2020 was an unforgettable year, a year that tested all of us and put our shortcoming right in our faces, making it impossible to ignore. But COVID-19 also exposed pre-existing social and economic conditions of a system that increasingly leave people and countries behind. This crisis serves as a wake-up call to the importance of aligning our economies to the SDGs and the Paris agreements to foster more resilience. Its lack of action and underinvestment in sustainable development, and thus the SDGs, inequality, financial volatility that led to this systemic risk, be they economic or nature-based, and these come at a high price for all of us. So far, our inaction in this pandemic has led to 2 million dead, 500 million have lost their job, the world GDP is down by 4.5%, foreign direct investment, that is the fuel for the economies, is down by 45%. Remittances that support poor families of migrants and trade are down 10%, large source of revenue for developing countries. 65 million and an additional 100 million people risk falling into extreme poverty, and twice as many people worldwide endure acute hunger. Vulnerable population developing countries continue to be the most harshly hit because of limited access to opportunities and little social protection to face these crises. What the world's need right now from leaders is fourfold. This is what I would focus on. First, ensuring the 15 trillion injected by government to support economies during the COVID-19 is channeled to a Green New Deal that is global, using the SDG as a blueprint so we can come out of this crisis with less inequality, not more, with more resilience, peace, and more sustainable and circular economy. This New Deal must target support to MSMEs, micro, small, medium enterprises, women, youth, and developing countries, all harshly hit by this crisis, but also it must target the digital infrastructure of developing countries. Second, the stimulus package must accelerate transition to a decarbonized and sustainable economy. Third, our leader must resist putting austerity measure in place too soon. Austerity measure hurt women and the poor the most. Fourth, they must support a strong reform of the multilateral system to solve climate change, biodiversity, and ocean depletion, inequalities, and tax haven issues that can only be solved through international cooperation, as well as accelerate the reform of the trade and investment treaties to ensure they deliver for all, including the poorest countries and the poorest people, as well as the planet. We need to support MSMEs and entrepreneurs because they are the bedrock of our community, creating 50 to 90% of jobs, especially for the most vulnerable, such as women, old people, and youth, and generate, on average, 50% of the GDPs in our countries. And unlike the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, there's much more targeted of these stimulus packages this time to MSMEs, but it's still not enough. Because 2/3 of them, of these MSMEs, report being negatively impacted by the pandemic and the lockdown, and many of them have had less than 6 months of cash to survive. We need to invest in and have gender responsive policies, as the pandemic, just like policies, is not gender neutral. Women are affected disproportionately to men. Women employees are overrepresented in the most affected economic sectors, tourism and services, for instance, and are the first to lose their job and access to education. They are also the one filling in for increased unpaid care as we go through this crisis, like children at home, among others. Only 2% of investment go to female-only startup, and less than 0.5% go to women of colors. So financing is needed. And MSMEs owned by women are 27% more likely to not survive the pandemic. Gender need to be a forethought of our stimulus packages and policy and not an afterthought. We need more women in leadership, as called for by SDG 5, to design and implement these gender responsive policies. We also need to invest in the digital infrastructure everywhere, as I mentioned. The pandemic has demonstrated the unequal access by rural and urban area, men and women, and developing countries. And everything, and I mean everything, is going online. Also, unequal opportunity to education, to health, and to sell and buy are associated with the lack of infrastructure in the digital space. Small and medium enterprises and entrepreneurs in developing countries have less access to reliable, affordable, to ICT infrastructure, but also to the modern electricity they need to support ICT, information communication technology. It is paramount that we address the fast expanding digital divide. Otherwise, we risk leaving a lot of people and countries behind. Differentiated access to digital solutions, including e-commerce, but also increasingly the patent and knowledge on frontier technology is increasingly concentrated in two countries alone, US and China. And without adequate policies, private-public partnership, and international cooperation, we risk widening existing inequalities and creating new ones, leaving many more behind. As we saw with the deployment of information communication technology, resulting in an enormous concentration of wealth in the ownership of the major digital platform and unequal access to the benefits. Because these new digital platforms benefit from network effects, so that market tend to concentrate, leaving a small number of large players and concentration of wealth. It also have a gender impact. Women, for instance, are 12% less likely to use the internet than men. And if we go to the poorest country, the least developed countries, they're 33% less likely women to use the internet than men. Yet the digital and creative economy could boost their trade, access to finance, and innovation. So the recovery need to focus on entrepreneurship and micro, small, medium enterprises, gender inclusion, and digital infrastructure, as well as decarbonize an economy that deliver for people and planet. UNCTAD has been saying this all along, before the pandemic hit, that solidarity and massive investment are needed from the public sector, not unlike the Marshall Plan after World War II. And now the Secretary General is seconding this. And we still stand by the thought, as often recalled by Secretary General, we need to come together and fight together to recover better together. The Secretary General has also called for 10% of the world GDP, the average in developing country, to be targeted at this Marshall Plan. This is greatest act of global leadership, an act involving from learning from the past that nationalism and nativism serves short-term interests, but does not result in resilience, cohesion, and sustainable prosperity for all, and thus, in the long run, for none. As the famous African proverb says, if you want to run fast, run alone, but if you want to run far, let's run with others. So the question is, how do we do this? And what is our individual role, knowing we can't get there alone? Well, in terms of UNCTAD, we will continue our work, aim at spreading the benefit of a globalized economy more fairly and effectively, and on the flip side, help equip developing countries with the capacity to deal with the potential drawback of a greater economic integration and globalization and digitalization of the economy. Those following UNCTAD work will have noticed the extensive number of analyses UNCTAD conducted and published on COVID-19 impact on developing countries' trade, investment, entrepreneurship, digitalization, and gender divide since February. The current international focus on recovery defined the need to qualify and implement a recovery that is effective and can withstand an unprecedented relapse into shocks, as we have encountered in current times. This means taking this once-in-a-generation opportunity to build a green, resilient, inclusive, and consistent recovery. We have a choice here. We can either reinvest in the old economy and have another crisis in another 4 or 5 years, or we can invest in the new economy and actually start accelerating the implementation of the SDGs and be in a better place for us and for our children. UNCTAD 2020 report on COVID-19 impact of trade and development further shows that as countries move into COVID-19 recovery phase, the opportunity arises for policymakers to decouple growth from high CO2 emission and invest in green technology and industry. That is, reduce climate change impact, boost digitalization, trade and investment, and entrepreneurship. That is, accelerate implementation of the SDGs through stimulus packages, newfound money. The report argues that frontier technology are essential for sustainable development, but they also could accentuate existing inequalities. It is up to policies, the policies that we're going to put in place now, to reduce this risk and make frontier technologies contribute to increasing equality and not inequality. Low and middle income developing countries and the least developed countries cannot afford to miss this new wave of rapid technological change. They missed the first one. Success in the 21st century will require a balanced approach, building a robust industrial base and promoting frontier technology that can help them deliver on the 2030 agenda with a people-centered, inclusive, and sustainable societies. Leadership often comes with key adjustment and reform, and thus reform in our economic focus. Hence, what more should we do? We should have the courage to raise awareness in our respective environment for the right thing to be done. As mentioned, I advanced the promotion of an equality and equity dimension through the economic model of the Global Green New Deal. We need a new economics for sustainable development that would be spurred by international solidarity and interconnectedness. Developed nations should not only fund their green economic stimulus, as I mentioned before, but also that of developing countries to the tune of 10% of the world GDP. This would allow developing countries where most new infrastructure is being built to use circular economy principle, avoid investing in stranded assets, while generating jobs to help workers transition to the new economy, such as from fossil fuel to renewable energy. The use of circular economy, such as through special economic zone, would help to produce more with less waste, resources, and energy to a make, use, reuse circular pattern. Similarly, supporting the creative economy, which is also called the orange economy. This year marked the celebration of the creative economy, relying more on human capital and information communication technology, and would support the youth entrepreneurship and job creation that we need so badly. The creative economy supports sustainable entrepreneurship and empowers innovators, especially the digital natives. Marketing, fashion, or media company also influence value and consumption and lifestyle choices, as they are often operated by young people who tend to support sustainability. A dynamic creative economy can thus play a vital role in promoting other alternative economic models, especially in developing countries. The pandemic demonstrated the cost of underinvestment in health, providing countries an impetus to build their care economy, while creating even more decent jobs and addressing gender inequality. The care, or we call the purple economy, investing in education and health providers for children, elderly, people with disabilities, would create 2.5 times as many jobs as targeting physical infrastructure, as the past New Deal have done, and create 30 times more jobs for women, as well as easing restriction on women's time and have a greater fiscal sustainability, i.e. capacity to repay itself. The yellow or attention economy has a market value in the trillions. It is the monetization of consumers' attention by platforms such as Google, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, TikTok, all the one, by collecting vast amount of information on consumers. They monetize this information by developing ever more sophisticated algorithms and persuasion technique to keep us clicking, scrolling, and sharing. These techniques prey on many of our core subconscious tendency for pleasure or fear to trap our attention and alter our behavior or perception. If we could harness this attention economy, it could become a powerful tool to effectuate the necessary behavioral change needed to transition towards the world we want from and towards sustainable consumption and production, thriving in authentic mutual connection by using technology to bring humanity back into the alignment with the rest of nature and SDGs. To bring all of this together, we must align global economic policies and financial system with the 2030 agenda, channel sustainable financing to developing countries and especially least developed countries. And for that, the proper incentive and regulation must be in place to allow the private sector to also invest in these sectors. To seize the potential of financial innovation, new technologies, and digitalization to provide equitable access to finance. And harness the task force on digital financing of the SDGs to catalyze game-changing action that harness the potential and mitigate the risk related to financial technologies and the SDGs, including AI, artificial intelligence, that can provide real-time data on companies beyond what they report. We need to give decision makers the courage to do the right thing and act in solidarity. We can't win the war against COVID-19 unless everyone has access to the vaccine. or on climate change and biodiversity loss unless developing countries have access to innovation and frontier technologies to foster green, blue, orange, or the creative economy. We have a duty to use the trillions that materialize to jumpstart the economy. And all of this looks to solidarity, cooperation, and partnership towards the SDGs. So let's go back to partnership. We all know that partnership, they're tough. It requires time. Varying issue of different interests, nationalistic views, societal or system distrust, and the unpredictability of the future all serve as liability of partnership. But through all of the confusion and differences in belief, I am yet to witness a human being who does not want to protect his or her home and her family and the future of their children and grandchildren. The home and family are a strong bond we have as human, and planet Earth is our largest home. In my own space as chief of the New York office, I does focus on bridging public and private sector collaboration and partnership and large-scale action to elevate economic prosperity for all. My team and I have developed trusted partnership that we could turn to in this year in crisis, and they turn to us as well. But UNCTAD does not only focus on the partnership part of the SDGs, but also on the means of implementation it contains, such as financing, trade, technology, infrastructure, and data for the SDGs, which are at the core of our UNCTAD. But UNCTAD does not only focus on the partnership part of the SDGs, but also on the means of implementation it contains, such as financing, trade, technology, and data for the SDGs, which are at the core of our mandate. To generate inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economic growth post-COVID-19, we must have the courage to support strong multilateral response. Together, let's be brave and advocate for the 10% of the world GDP be targeted to developing countries as called for by the UN Secretary General, for 50% of stimulus packages to be targeted towards the care economy, micro, small, medium enterprises, especially those owned by women. Earth is our home, and we are an interconnected family. If our neighbor falls in this world crisis of climate change or poverty acceleration, so we. The cost of inaction is too outrageous to ignore. Let's turn to resiliencies in existing partnership. If solidarity is not sufficient justification to support developing countries, the interconnectedness of our health and ecosystem demonstrated by the pandemic should be enough of an incentive. We must strengthen existing capacity of groups in pushing for multilateral approaches. There must be diversity, inclusion, and acceptance in all partnership to overcome the issue and the reluctances. We must constantly remind ourselves of the substantial good we have been able to achieve together in global leadership because there's no resiliency in a fragmented system. Multilateralism is the surest proof of effective global leadership. This is a chance for us to motivate empathy, not self-interest, for global leadership to be effective. UNCTAD and its membership will aim to advance the international consensus on all these issues at a very important time at its 15th Quadrennial Conference to be held by our colleagues from Barbados in October 2021. The theme being from inequality and vulnerability to prosperity for all. Very appropriate for this year. We hope to devise ways to ensure multilateralism through trade and development and entrepreneurship is a true enabler of sustainable development and to address the massive unmet investment needs of developing countries struggling to tackle the coronavirus crisis. UNCTAD's work plan will also be decided for the next 4 years to accelerate knowledge and advance consensus and progress on globalization and global governance that delivers for all and leave no one behind. Lastly, let's all remember it's not just about our world leader, but every one of us as an individual leader in our small environment, be it at home, school, workplace, should ensure to answer verbally and in true deed this personal question of what can I do to support in this crisis? What can I do to advance the SDGs and accelerate the SDGs implementation? This is my vision of global leadership. I thank you and look forward to meet you in person shortly.